I am currently just for about another month an assistant professor at the University of Texas, but I've sort of made radical changes in my life and I decided I want to do scholarly writing and career coaching full time. And so I am building a business around that. And it's basically taking some of the ideas from Publish Not Perish and kind of expanding them out into sort of more resources and more opportunities for community, also for coaching and things like that. And so Publish Not Perish really was born out of a frustration that started for me within grad school, where I had, not a lot of preparation for how to be an academic writer, and then also didn't have a lot of training for how to deal with all the barriers and challenges you have. Because writing barriers, I've had them all: perfectionism, procrastination, imposter syndrome, you name it, I've probably been there. And I kind of went through the hard work of figuring out how to make different strategies work for me and how to develop a writing practice that was really aligned with my values and goals. And that's kind of what I wanted Publish Not Perish to be. I wanted people to have more access to these different strategies and different things that might work. But I also wanted to do it in a way that was not dogmatic and said that you have to do it this way. Like you have to write 30 minutes a day, or you have to do this and you have to do that. Rather, it's about finding the things that really work for you. So that's what Publish Not Perish is about. But I'm really excited to do this workshop with Nancy. I love her newsletter, and we really kind of align in a lot of ways. So it was a nice opportunity to collaborate. So I'm excited to be here tonight.
So folks can go ahead and continue introducing themselves in the chat if you would like. And please talk to each other as well. That's always one of my favorite things that happens in this, is that people make these connections. Like a whole bunch of people who live in Lancaster. Way to go, guys. So keep chatting with each other as well as we go. Do you want to get us started? Thank you, Jen.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right, we've already kind of introduced our newsletters. So you have the names of those. If you're not subscribed to either of those, then you can check them out. And this is what we're up to tonight. So it's very workshop-y. Our whole goal was to really kind of give you a little bit of structure, have a little bit of kind of for you on how we think about planning and goal setting and thinking through summer and things like that. But it's really going to be a time that's kind of has some space for you to actually think about it. So we're going to pause and allow you to reflect and think about what you might want to be up to this summer and what your goals might be. And we're going to start with imagining the ideal but real summer. So it's a combination of, trying to envision what you would like your summer to be, but also taking into account any sort of plans that you already have or obligations that you already have that are going to sort of take up your time. And then also trying to think about not just sort of working yourself to the bone, but like having time for rejuvenation, having time for family and all those other things that you want to do. Then we'll do goal setting. We'll have a little bit of time to talk about anticipating obstacles, and then we'll have a bit of time at the end for a wrap up and suggestions for next steps. So that's what we're up to tonight. Okay, so to start us off, what I want us to think about is what you have going on this summer first. So before we get to your specific writing goals, I think it's important to think about what actually is going to be taking up your time this summer, or how you want to be spending your time. Because me personally, in the summer, I know that usually, I've gone through like the full academic year. I might be a little tired. I don't want to have the same schedule where it's like a breakneck pace sometimes. I want to have some time to slow down. So I want to think, I want to give people the opportunity to think about, okay, how are you going to build in rest? How are you going to build in time with family? How are you going to build in time for activities that maybe you don't get as much time for during the school year? And then also think about your actual capacity for what you have time for in terms of writing and in terms of, any sort of research projects you want to do. So we're going to give you a few minutes to think about all of this. And I also have some sub questions that I'm going to put up in a minute, but I'd like you to start with thinking about other summer things that you have going on. So maybe that you're going to be taking a vacation. And so think about that, write that down. Maybe you know that you're going to have family coming into town for a couple weeks and you know you're probably not going to get as much work done. Maybe you know that your children are going to be in daycare or in camp for certain parts of the summer, but maybe not other parts of the summer. So you're not going to have as much time potentially during those periods. Any sort of other work responsibilities that you have or things like that that you might want to account for.
Or lie
And
down.
oops. I'm just going to mute you real quick. And then also, I want you to think about how much time you can realistically spend on your research and writing, because I remember when I was first starting out, I thought, well, if I think about the work week, 40-hour work week, in the summer, I can spend 8 hours a day on writing. I can just write for 8 hours because that's what you do. That's how you're productive. Well, the reality is that I cannot write that much. I am not, unless I'm binging, or I'm like in a very deep work mode, but then I can't do that for like a long period of time. I might be able to do that for a couple of weeks and then I'm going to need a major break. So the thing to think about is actually how much time and energy can you devote to something like writing? Maybe drafting actually takes a lot more creative energy. So if you're going to be drafting, maybe you can't spend 8 hours doing that either. And you have to kind of break up your time in different ways. I remember I was shocked when my dissertation advisor told me that she never wrote more than 2 hours a day. She was a prolific writer, but somehow like she got it done in that amount of time. And I think what it's important to reflect on is how much time can you actually devote to that? How much time is actually going to be realistic to you? Because it is really hard to kind of, when you're doing that creative, that analytical work, your brain gets really taxed very quickly. And it's very difficult to sustain long writing periods for a long period of time, like a full summer or something like that. So I want you to think about that. And then the other thing I would like you to think about is what is your ideal week? So this means how many hours a day would you like to be working? How many hours a day would you like to be doing other things, like summertime things? Maybe you want to go swimming or you want to take your kids somewhere or you want to do other things. Maybe you want to do a 4-day work week. Maybe you want to only work in the mornings and have the afternoons off. Maybe, just kind of brainstorm and think, okay, what feels like a sustainable and realistic rhythm for me that I would feel like I could be my best self in terms of both being productive and making sure that I'm taking time to do the other things that summer allows for us. Okay, so I'm just going to put up these additional questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to give you about 8 or so minutes to think about this. Actually, I'm going to give you a little less than that. I'm going to give you about 5 or 6 minutes to do this. And then we'll come back together. We'll have a chance for like a couple questions if there's any that come up. But really, this is time for you to kind of think through what do you want your summer to look like in terms of your rhythm. Okay. All right. Go ahead and take a few minutes quietly on your own to brainstorm some of these questions.
No, we have to write down something.
Just a writing?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
new?
Just a reminder, please mute yourself if you're not muted. All right, I'm going to give you one more minute to wrap up any thoughts you're working on now, and then we're going to take a few minutes to discuss. All right, we are going to come back together. I'm going to stop the share and see your faces if you would like to show them or not. That's fine too. So my question for you is, what is something that stands out to you about this exercise? So you can either unmute and tell us, or you can put it in the chat, whichever you'd like to do. What is something that stands out to you about this exercise? Sarah says, I don't have a lot of time this summer.
And I could say here, I was going to say earlier that I lost my train of thought, that part of the rationale for, I know it's shocking, isn't it? Part of the rationale for doing this planning party, which is distinct from the fall ones that I've done, is just that like summertime can be so tricky. Because in my mind, yeah, summer is going to go on for like 6 years, right? Like I'm gonna do a whole lot of things, but that's not really true. And for so many of us, I think our time is really different. I know mine shifts from like week to week in a way that I find just like kind of jumbly. Like during the regular academic year, I can kind of hit a rhythm, and man, summer childcare, that is a whole thing for a lot of folks I know, and certainly is for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna affirm a lot of what people are saying, and then I'll stop talking in case other people want to talk. But just to say, I think, and this is why we wanted to start, this was Jenn's like wise intervention, like with how you want it to feel, like before you make your list of things you're gonna do, which is where we're going next. Don't worry, it's my jam. But is thinking about how you want it to feel, right? And that felt really clarifying for me. And also the importance of rest. I think especially if your schedule changes a lot from one season to the next, like giving yourself a minute or maybe more minutes than you want to like transition and rest, I think is really important. I turned in my grades, I think 2 weeks ago, and I'm still like transitioning and resting. So I'll stop in case other people want to unmute themselves and chat, or you can just keep chatting in the chat.
I found it super helpful I've realized I haven't actually done this for myself. Like I have all my multiple calendars for my kids and all their things. And this is just amazing to think about the question of the rhythm of how I want to be doing things. And yeah, and I love what everybody else is saying, but just it's crazy that it didn't even dawn on me to do such a thing for myself. So amazing.
No, that's great. Other folks want to chime in? Yeah, part of the reason we wanted to start here is because, yeah, it seems like you think about, the months, those summer months, and it seems like so much time, but then when you actually start looking at it, it seems like less time. And of course, we don't want to produce anxiety in this exercise. That's not really the goal, but the goal is to kind of be realistic, because so often people get discouraged when they set out, they're like, I'm going to do all this summer. But when they actually sort of start going through the other things that they've already committed to and the things that they want to do, they want to make sure they have family time, they want to make sure they can take a vacation or whatever it is, that you can't actually fit those big goals into such like a smaller amount of space. So I'm a big advocate of setting realistic goals. And in order to set realistic goals that you can feel good about achieving, you have to be realistic about how much time you're actually going to commit and not overcommit to, doing more than is actually possible. It'll feel better if you can, kind of set a goal that you think that you can actually reach. You'll feel more accomplished and, kind of a bit more grounded moving into the next school year. Other thoughts? All right, then I think we can wrap that section and move on to those actual goals. So I will reshare and Nancy will take over.
I say, don't worry, we're gonna like make some lists. That's, anyone who knows me at all, that's my thing. And I would just say one more note about time, the way that and I just thought about this right now. I have a summer, which probably a lot of people do, where there's like some weeks where my kids are just home, some weeks where they have camp for like 2 hours a day. That doesn't really help me that much. And then 2 weeks, 2 magical weeks where they're like totally gone for sleepaway camp. So it's this kind of like up and down. So my goal for the summer is to try to like work a little bit every day to like keep my brain in the writing and thinking, and then have some times when I can kind of toggle on and off, like if that makes sense. So trying to think about like what is the baseline that I need to feel like I'm in touch with my writing projects and like with myself as a writer. And it's actually it's not 8 hours a day, as Jen was saying. I don't need, unlimited time to still feel like my head is in my work. So I want to think about planning what we're actually going to do in kind of two phases. The first one is to think about like, what are your big dreams for the summer? So keeping in mind that summer is not 6 years long and you can't write 20 hours a day, keeping in mind your actual time and your actual schedule. What are your dreams for what you'll get accomplished this summer? I like, and I do this both with like, individual writing days, sometimes weeks, but I think this would be helpful for the summer, to think about like 2 or 3 tiers of goals. Like, what is the baseline? What do you like definitely know you can get done this summer? Maybe because you're going to finish it next week. What is your target? Like, I would feel great if I got this done. And then what is your stretch goal? I think sometimes we start with that. Like, what is my biggest, wildest dream for the summer? And then hold that bar up. I'd encourage you to take, and we'll just take like maybe 2 or 3 minutes right now, to set those kind of like 2 or 3 tiers of goals. What do you know you definitely can do? What's your baseline? What's your target? The thing that's maybe a little more than that you feel really good about. And then what's your stretch goal? So let's take like 2 minutes to jot that down. I know that was quick, so you might need, if you need to come back to this at some point, and we are recording this, and I'll send the link out, Jen. I'll send the link out. I'm gonna send mine on Sunday. I'm not sure when yours will go out, Jen. All that to say, if you need a little more time to reflect on this, or if this changes for you, I have some scribbled notes in my notebook. I'm probably going to put it in an index card and like tape it on the wall in front of my desk just to have that visual reminder for the summer. So if that changes for you, I think that makes a lot of sense. But for me, it feels helpful to at least differentiate between those two different levels so that if you don't hit your like wildest dream stretch goal this summer, you don't end up feeling like you were a failure, so that you can definitely hit your baseline goal and feel really good and proud of the work that you've done. And I think that having those different levels, it's just like, I don't know, psychologically really important to me. Now I want to make a whole bunch more lists to think about how you're actually going to get this work done. Again, I think one of the challenges of the summer is that so often we have these like really fragmented little bits of time. Like maybe you have a couple days where there's like 2 hours that are wide open consistently. But then maybe you have a bunch of days where you've got like 15 minutes, or you've got like, 10 minutes when you're going in between different kinds of things. And so I think it's really helpful to plan for those different chunks of time. Could you move us ahead one, Jen? Perfect. Okay, so I like to think of this as like a kind of menu of options. I think maybe that just feels like more fun to me than like a big list of work, although ideally your writing work is also fun in some way. So my suggestion is to start building this menu of options by thinking about the kinds of work you're hoping to do this summer. You probably have things that you're hoping to draft. There probably are things you'd like to revise, and then anything you'll need to research. When I'm thinking about research, I mean both like learning about like an actual thing, like I have a whole bunch of books checked out that I'm reading for content. Um, there also might be research in terms of like you're trying to learn how to write a new genre. So you're like reading examples of it and trying to analyze it. You might also be doing the kind of research where you're figuring out where you want to send something. So you're reading a whole bunch of journals or magazines or something, or you're looking at pitch guidelines or submissions guidelines. So make yourself a couple of lists, starting with the kinds of things you're hoping to do, what you're hoping to draft, what you're hoping to revise, and what you're hoping to research. And then we'll go back through and mark those up, thinking about how much time each of those kinds of things will take. So let's take maybe 6 minutes, and I'll set a timer, and just make yourself a whole bunch of lists of things you're hoping to draft, what you'd like to revise, and then anything else you'd like to research. So get to a place where you can pause your listing. I'm curious how this went for folks. I think depending on what you're working on, I don't know, this might be easier or less easy, and there probably are other ways of thinking about your work for this summer. So take what works for you, and then, abandon what doesn't. To me, it felt clarifying in part to think about where are some of the places where I'm getting stuck, and like, oh, maybe that's a research problem that's keeping me from moving forward with something. Maybe there's something that I need to just sit down and draft so that I can work on it. So I'm curious what you came up with as you were trying to think about drafting versus revising versus research, if that felt useful, or if those things are kind of too entangled to kind of neatly break out.
I'll talk. I just I feel like my tasks are so big, I was like, revise proposal.
Yeah, see, and no, that's not a task, that's a project.
No, so what,
Like-
so yeah, how yeah, then I just kind of my brain like short circuits. So how would you tease something like that apart? Oh
Yeah,
wow.
no, that's a great question. And that's I didn't explain the directions for it yet, but that was the second part of it, was thinking about it in terms of time, right? For a lot of big projects, there might not actually be a ton of things that you can do in that like 30-minute, 10-minute block, but there are some, even for a big project like a book proposal, right? Like looking up all your comps and like putting a bunch of them in that section, like copying and pasting your ooh I get distracted by what looks like a great suggestion in the comments or in the chat. I think there are some things, right? There are some kind of like researchy things, there's some kind of formatting things, but it might be that like your project actually just requires at least 30 minutes to get into it. And I think like, yeah, revised proposal is too big of a thing to actually work on. And so it might be oh, I could talk about proposals forever, but like thinking about each of the sections of it, right? Like part of it is the project, like is the overview, the tables of the chapter summaries, all of your parts. I think sometimes even for me, and this is so silly, but I think I'm probably not the only person who needs this, like sometimes the first step is even just like opening the document or printing it out and rereading it to like figure out what is happening in there. I think oftentimes, especially for a big project, like a book proposal or a book or a complicated essay or an article, I think like for me, printing it out, which sometimes feels a little wasteful because it's a lot of paper, but like, or looking at it, to figure out what's actually there and starting to mark it up. Then I can make some lists, right? And I can think like, okay, there are some things that are really like, I have to spend like a weekend, like putting everything on the wall and like thinking about the structure of this book or this article or whatever. But there probably are some things that you can do in like half-hour chunks, which are like, oh wait, no, I need to revise this chapter summary. I need to explain this idea right here. Jen, do you have any other suggestions, or if other folks have suggestions, you're welcome to chime in the chat about taking big projects. I think based on the chat and like what people were saying in the beginning, they were working on taking big projects and kind of breaking them down to make them be more manageable. I think that's something a lot of people are working on.
One of the things that I do in my planning phase is to kind of list out what I think are going to be all the things that I have to do to get to it. Because I think when you're like, okay, book proposal, it's like, that's like a big thing. And until you start breaking it down into, okay, so these are the various sections that I have to have. What do I need to do to like draft each of those individual sections? Because if you start breaking it down into smaller pieces, like each time you like break it down into a smaller piece, it's easier to estimate how much time it's going to take. Whereas if you're just like, write a book proposal, it's like, oh, I don't know how long that's going to take. So I think it's like really kind of, and a lot of times, especially if it's not something you've never done before, like if you're a grad student and you've never written a dissertation before, you don't know everything that goes into it, but you could look at somebody else's and go, what is in each of these sections? What sort of thing do I have to do? What sort of task? It's like it's like learning project management skills. And the other thing that I would recommend is, especially if it's something that you've never done before, also kind of take notes on your process and how long things took you, because the next time you go to write that book proposal, or the next time you go to write a journal article, then you'll have kind of a record of what you did to get there and how long the various steps took. It doesn't mean it's going to exactly map on, but because every project is different, and there's going to be variations, and there's going to be different roadblocks that you experience in different projects. But the more you do that, the more you kind of figure yourself out and figure out your process, and then you can kind of more easily understand what the project takes, and then how long it takes you to do each of these individual pieces.
I also think it's a good reminder that kind of like, and I'm not someone who does like time tracking. I don't know if you are, Jen. I know some people like keep spreadsheets of like, I wrote for 20 minutes or 2 hours, or whatever, so many words I wrote. Like, that's not something I do, but I do a lot of like kind of the journaling that you were talking about, Jen. Like, this is what I'm working on. I just think that can be such a good reminder that like even something that is very hard and very long, like the time to finish it is not actually infinite, which it feels like at the time. Like, it is a completable process. And if you have those records for yourself of like, this was a very hard thing to do, but I did it. And there are some great suggestions in the chat about some of the 10-minute things. And thanks, Kate, for this reminder that like, yeah, brainstorming, problem solving, going on a walk, thinking when you're in your shower, like those are all writing too. And I know so often if I'm feeling stuck or flustered, like that is what I actually need. And it's hard to give myself credit for that as part of the process, because I can't check it off in the same way. And that seems like an especially good thing to embrace in the summer, right? Like giving yourself some time to be a little looser and be a little more flexible. Right. So this is a tool or an idea you can keep coming back to. I am going to continue working on my list probably tomorrow, and thinking about the different chunks of time for things, and probably something that you might want to like update as you go across the summer. And if folks have other good ideas about breaking projects down or trying to think about I don't know, something, I think it's really helpful to have a little bucket of like 10 to 30-minute things that you can do, because so often you don't actually have like 2 hours or 4 hours to do a whole thing. But if you have half an hour, you can still actually like get a lot done in that time. Do we want to switch now to talking a little bit quickly about obstacles, Jen? I love the idea of a waterproof notepad. I also do a lot, this wouldn't help you in the shower, but I do a lot of recording on the voice memo in my phone, like if I'm out for a run and that unsticks me, or if I'm in my car, I have kind of a long commute during the school year, I'll use my voice recorder to get things that way, which can be really helpful.
Yeah, I love that tip. That's great. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think something that is important that I've learned along the way is to have contingency plans. So if you have your goals set out for the summer, and you have your, so Nancy, you described the sort of like baseline goal, and then the kind of reach or the stretch goal. In my writing group, we often talk about it as good, better, and best goals. But even within that, you have sometimes things come up. And one of the things that I started doing is in my kind of schedule, on a weekly basis, I have a makeup, section of my calendar. So if I don't get to any of my goals for the week, then I have some time to make up. I do the same thing with longer term planning. So if I plan to get something done in the summer, I have some time built in somewhere when that thing goes wrong, you get sick, your kid gets sick, something is going to come up, that it's sort of built in somewhere that I know I have some time so that I can still get to my good or my better goal or something, or maybe even my best goal. So what would be helpful to think about is, okay, maybe where you could put something like that in, and then also what might be the things that come up for you, what might be the challenges, so that you can anticipate now, and then you can kind of think about what you might do to overcome those challenges. So I'm just going to give you like, maybe 2 minutes just to kind of jot down some ideas of what you think the challenges might be and what you might do to overcome those. So
I
2
would just
minutes.
add quickly that I think one obstacle that comes up a lot in the summer, especially if you're used to like being on a campus or in a school during the school year, is like if you, I don't just being lonely or like feeling like you don't have, maybe you're probably surrounded by people if you have kids, but like not having like a writing community, not having people who are asking you about your writing. That's something that kind of comes up often for me in the summer, is a sense that I'm like kind of wandering adrift and like what is happening. And so I think it's important for me to plan in times when I'm going to be able to check in and ask for help. That's an obstacle I have to think about a lot.
Yeah, that's great. All right, 2 minutes. Okay, so you may want to spend some more time after this thinking about that and maybe kind of coming up with some contingency plans once you kind of have solidified what those goals are a little bit more. Because it just is a little like I find if something comes up and I don't get to do the thing that I had set out to do in the time that I wanted to do it, I can feel very discouraged. But having the contingency plan really does help sort of make it so I can still kind of achieve that goal, which again, psychologically is really important because otherwise we feel like we're always behind if we're not setting realistic goals and then coming up with plans that can help us kind of work around any obstacles that we face. So I highly recommend you kind of think about that a little bit. Okay, so we're going to move on to wrapping up. A couple of things that I wanted to just point out is in Publish Not Perish, we have a writing circle that we basically, it's a writing accountability and support group that meets every, well, it doesn't meet, it actually, it's asynchronous and it's online. So we meet virtually whenever it's convenient. And we check in on Mondays and Fridays. And it's basically, this is the goals that I'm setting for my week. And at the end of the week, this is how I did with my goals. It's a really lovely space. It's a nice group of people. So you can go over to publishparish.net and click on Writing Circle. It's at the top of the screen and you can find out more information about that. I've also just started taking on one-on-one coaching clients. So I focus specifically on scholarly writing and careers. And so with the writing focused stuff, I work on a lot of things around helping people develop writing practices, helping with things like procrastination and imposter syndrome, any sort of those writing barriers that I identified that I've had and that I've worked through myself in the beginning. That's the sort of thing that we can work on in one-on-one coaching. And you can find that on my website at jenmcclearen.com. And then Nancy has some other things to offer here at the end as we wrap up.
Sure. So as we kind of close out our time together, I just wanted to think about your next steps. And I think it's helpful to think about this in terms of like, what is the next milestone? Like either in terms of I want to be done with one part of the project, I want to be ready to like send it to someone to share it with them. I'm going to submit it, whatever the case may be, to actually think about the next milestone. And then to think as well about your one specific next step. Like, what is the one thing that you're doing tomorrow? So I am not going to finish an essay tomorrow, but I do have like 2 or 3 next steps that will help me get moving with it towards a deadline that I'm going to set for myself. So I need to think about that. So take a minute or two, look at your calendar, think about your next deadline or next milestone in your project, and then in the chat, commit yourself publicly in a friendly group to a specific next step. What's the next thing you're going to do to moving your writing forward? Thank you so much, Brianna, for already answering the prompt. Thank you. So go ahead and chime in. Yeah. I feel like a lot of you are my people. I have like 8 tabs open on my phone right now of like things that are definitely possibly interesting, but because they're just like tabs in my phone, I'm not doing anything with them. So I should probably put that on my list. Ooh, these are great. I love reverse outline. So clarifying. I love the idea of adding in that contingency time, like you were talking about, Jen, like just knowing. Yep. Yeah. Open it up. Sometimes you just got to open up the doc.
Stuff
Yeah.
is gonna come up. Yeah.
Reread. And I think also like probably a lot of people, this is so good, guys. A lot of people are probably like coming back to projects you haven't been working on, and like it takes time to get your head back into that, and that's totally fine. So like open it up, spend some time reading it, like be reacquainted with the version of you that was working on it most recently. I think the idea of a mind map is so great.
Yeah, I love that. I love a good mind map. Yay, send my book proposal to a colleague for feedback. That's a big
That's
one.
awesome.
That's amazing.
And it'll be like out of your hands for a little
Yeah,
while.
that's a good one, Tori. I like that one. Yeah, accountability and writing groups are great. It really is very helpful.
I just think it's so helpful. I always feel more committed if I write it down for myself, like that helps, but then saying it to someone else, even though I know like you guys aren't gonna like call me up and bother me, I assume. Some of you might. But just it's nice to feel more publicly committed. But great.
One of the things I used to do with my advisees is, I'd have them set their goals, and I would set my goals with them because I knew I couldn't let them down. Like I knew I could not let them down. Like it's easier to let down my peers. It was my advisees. I felt like a stronger sense of commitment when I told them I was going to get something done, and they would follow up with me. They'd be like, "Jen, did you get it done yet?" Like, I'm working on it.
That's so good that it would be like modeling both, like, having big goals and then also like, maybe something struggling to get there.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I'm a big fan of transparency and talking about when I'm struggling, because people need to know when you struggle. Just because, you might have had some successful, publications out there in the world, like it doesn't mean that you didn't struggle. And I think we need to be more open and honest about that, especially with junior scholars.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that. It's hard. Writing's hard. Research is hard.
Right. And some things maybe get a little easier, but then new things get harder. And like I think that's fine. Like when I'm like right now, I'm able to like make my peace with that and be fine. I don't always feel quite so sad about it, but
It's a reminder I have to constantly.
yeah, it's an important reminder, I think. Well, we should probably wrap up here. If anybody else wants to commit themselves to something in the chat, your next step really can be just like, I'm going to open up that document. I spent a while the other day going through my notebook from the semester, and I was like, which is semester I did not feel like I was doing any writing. And I was like, oh, there's a whole bunch of good ideas in here. And I like tabbed them with Post-it notes. And that was really great and invigorating. And like that counts as work too. So think about whatever your next step is. If you want to publicly commit yourself here, you're welcome to. I am going to send out, if you can believe it, the June intentions email for my newsletter on Sunday. I will have the link to this recording in there along with a kind of rundown of what we did. And I'll share that with Jenn as well. So if you're not subscribed to both of us, you could do that now, or you could look for it in each of our respective emails.
Yeah, mine's gonna go out on Tuesday, so.
Tuesday, see,
On
look,
Tuesday.
planning.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you all so much for spending
Thanks for
your
coming.
Wednesday evening with us. This was
Yeah.
great. I'm
Yeah.
so excited about the projects you all are working on. These are amazing.
Have a wonderful summer, everyone,
All right.
for coming.
Rewriting.
Take care.